Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. Um, my name is Mo Sayed, and I'm an immigration attorney with Offit Kurman. I'm pleased to be presenting today on the topic of the current immigration and visa system challenges for small business owners during the COVID crisis. I'm just wanted to let you know that we're using some slides today, and those slides are available or should be soon on the materials tab or handouts tab on the GoToWebinar portal. And the slides will also be sent to each one of those who registered via email after the program is over. We're all in this crazy time, and there's so much uncertainty, and everyone's trying to make sense of what the future holds. Myself, as an immigration attorney, I work with a lot of different clients, individuals, businesses, small, medium, large businesses, on a variety of situations, some of which involve foreign employees of U.S. companies, and as well as foreign individuals seeking to invest in the U.S. and partner with U.S. businesses, bring capital to U.S. businesses by purchasing businesses. It could be retail, service sector, you name it. So it's despite the downturn, it's still been active. And so my hope today was to explore, number one, what are the challenges that at least I hear from my clients that they're facing, and what the some solutions are, and what some of the opportunities may be in the long term. And in particular, the idea is that there are a lot of foreign companies and foreign nationals that view the current situation, the downturn, and as an opportunity to invest in America, where they can find good opportunities, good bargains, good deals for businesses in the U.S., and that's what I want to focus on. So I have the next slide number 2, tells you a little bit about the structure. We'll start discussing a little bit. It's not very legal stuff on the first part, which is more business related information, which is what might be certain scenarios in which a U.S. business, which I assume folks on this call are U.S. businesses, perhaps there are also folks that are with foreign businesses, but this is targeted more if you are a U.S. business owner in this situation. How do you leverage the visa and immigration system, and how do you connect with those foreign, I'll call them partners that may have capital or human resources that can be advantageous to the U.S. business. After talking about the business case, then I want to talk about some of the details about the visa programs that I think are useful in these scenarios, which enable foreign companies and foreign individuals to bring their investment and bring their talent to the U.S. And in some cases, not necessarily through a visa or through an immigration system, option, but simply by making available the human resource to a U.S. company that can work remotely with them. If you have questions, certainly feel free to email me. That's my email address, mosayed@offitkurman.com. And again, the slides will be available later. So if you can't see them right now, I'll try to make this as easy to follow as I can. But you'll get a recording of this with the slides later. So let's move on now. Let's think about this a little bit, right? And I mean, this is not an exhaustive list of the opportunities or the types of ideas to investigate. But number one, I feel that we have a shortage of capital right now because of the lockdowns. A lot of businesses are not operating, and you have a lot of uncertainty about the future. So one of the sources of capital that becomes worth investigating are the foreign businesses, where I believe that the experience so far has been that even though everyone's suffering from this pandemic and there's a health crisis and just a completely unprecedented situation all over the world, but many nations look at the U.S. as a robust economy, a country that's got a first-rate response to this crisis, and there's a lot of confidence that the U.S. will continue to grow and thrive after this is hopefully behind us. The question then becomes, how do you connect with those investors? And I'll talk a little bit about that. By investor, I'm not talking about the really very large amounts of capital. I'm talking about the small, medium-sized, let's say even like $100,000 to $1 million or $2 million dollars that your typical immigration-seeking or visa-seeking individual will be bringing to the table. So, we're not talking about the multi-million-dollar investments in this seminar. Even though these businesses, they may be startups, they may be existing businesses, and they could, I'm sure, grow to a large size. In this arrangement, it's that I'm proposing. It's important to think about what is the relationship between the U.S. company and the foreign company. Okay, this could be through a joint venture, it could be an outright sale, or it could be some kind of partnership. And we have to think about: are we really looking for the capital? Are we looking for the human resource? What is the sorry, this was the slide that I was referring to. What is the objective of such a arrangement, right? So that helps us figure out how we're going to draw up a contract with the foreign partner. Next, certainly there are U.S. businesses that, even though right now the labor market unemployment is very, very high, and folks are actually having the reverse problem where they have foreign nationals that they have on an H-1B visa or another type of visa, and they're trying to explore options for reduced hours, for remote working, and so at the same time, businesses do realize that there's some key foreign talent that they have to retain, and they're trying to figure out ways how to retain them. So we'll spend a little bit of time on that. The last one, yes, we covered that: furloughs and layoffs. How does that impact visas for existing foreign workers? So now, in terms of so that was some of the the high level theme, the theoretical framework of what we're going to cover. This slide has I want to give you 6 or 7 bullet points that are the actual subject matter, technical side. So we have, certainly we want to look carefully at the consequences of the economic downturn. No one has a magic crystal ball. All we know is that there's a lot of uncertainty, and as we adjust to this new reality, then we look at carefully, and I've said this before, what is it that the U.S. side business is looking for? Capital, human resource, access to foreign markets. How are we sort of coming to this? Let's say, how are we? What exact solution are we looking for? And then there's some visa categories that I think are relevant. So there's the E2 Treaty Investor Program. There's the L1A Intercompany Transfer Program. We have the EB5, which is a large dollar amount investment. and the H-1B and H-2B programs, which are employment-based, and they allow companies to bring over workers for temporary durations. And then there's the student visa, F1 OPT, which is every student that comes from overseas that is on a foreign student visa, they get a certain amount of time of work authorization where they can work for any employer for 1 year, and then they can get extensions later based on other factors. So that's what we want to cover. So recently on the H-2B program, there was an update from the Department of Homeland Security, and essentially this focuses on the U.S. food supply chain. So a situation arose where there was a need for some flexibility to alien workers that are working in the nation's food supply chain. So it's worth looking into. Some of you on the call may have be in the relevant community. I'll cover the H-2B program just very briefly because it could be a whole webinar on its own. But as the slide says, you have essentially services of labor of a temporary nature in the U.S. Lasting for no longer than 1 year. And you have to show that able and willing U.S. workers are not available. So that's the H-2B program, a short-term program. Usually, these are not your higher degreed professionals, which are the subject of the H-1B program. Okay. All right. So here's just kind of my own brainstorming. This is again not an exhaustive list. If we think through what are the consequences of this pandemic on the economy. So, I have clients, saying that these are folks that are not able to afford to pay the rent anymore. So what do we do? So cash flow is a big issue, right? There's loans which are, not functioning like very smoothly. Human resource is an issue. Now, on the plus side, you have foreigners that are seeking deals. They need some investigation of businesses in the U.S. that they may acquire, and if they're betting on a recovery and continued growth, then let's see how we can connect with those non-U.S. sources of investment from businesses, families, individuals that are, there's generally, number one, there's the economic incentive. They're trying to make a better life for themselves by leaving a home country, which is unstable. Right now, a lot of, we know that there's been a lot of pressure on the healthcare systems globally, and it created huge amounts of economic instability. So if there's going to be some flight of capital from these countries, how do we get in touch with those folks and get them the message? How do we connect? How do we broker this deal, right? Now, workers have been laid off, so you have all this talent that's still there, but usually for a lot of these visa conditions, we have to show that we're paying them prevailing wage, and in some cases, you have to show that you haven't found a qualified U.S. worker. So, the issue becomes there are certain commitments on the visa side that don't allow a U.S. It's not an option to lay them off, and they stick around the U.S. After a certain number of time, they have to leave a certain amount of time. Now, as we're seeing, like with remote working, some businesses have adapted really well. So some of these H-1B workers could work remotely from their own home countries, right? And that's not a problem. Like the U.S. immigration law or state laws. I mean, there's no prohibition on having an employee that's based in another country, if they can still, perform the duties, that is just purely between the employer and employee. So there's some opportunities there, and that's something to look at. So all right, so let's see now. That was that's slide number 8. I'm sorry, I didn't. That's the one that I was talking about. So hopefully all of that was clear. And slide number 8 has these ideas that I had discussed. So next, I want to talk now, because we will start talking about the E and the L and the EB5. Okay, but before we get into those categories, I want to talk about I've got a set of slides that compares all of these, and then one commonality in all of these. So just in a quick nutshell, right? The E is a visa where you have an individual. I'll focus on the E2, which is a treaty investor. This is a situation where you have a foreign national that, let's say you're a landlord and you have some space that you want to rent out. A foreign national can purchase or lease some space and set up a restaurant. They bring in $200,000. They invest and operate their restaurant. They can get, or any type of business. There's no limitation on the kind of business, and they can get an E2 in treaty investor visa. And L1 is where you have two companies, one in the U.S., one overseas, and you have a employee being transferred from overseas to the U.S. Okay, again, this has many commonalities with the E2 in terms of like the U.S. side of the operations. And then the EB5 is your big dollar amount investment. So usually it's I'll get into the exact figures, but it's 900,000 and 1.7 million, I believe. I'll get to that later. But in all of these, for our purposes, like what's interesting is like if we're a U.S.-based business owner, we have to think about how do we fit into the business plan, right? So because the foreign company or national that's coming here has to demonstrate, in order to get approval from the immigration authorities, they have to demonstrate a certain number of things in order to qualify for this visa. And in many of these components of the business plan, they need a U.S. partner, right? So that's where I think we can look at how to leverage those opportunities, right? So the business plan, so say you're like a, owner of a U.S. IT company, all right, and you have some staff already, and you have a physical location, and you find a foreign business that wants to partner with you, and they're, let's say it's a family-owned business, and the principals want to apply for a certain visa. So the business plan has to show the business description, and so in there would be important to show that this will be a combination of a U.S. and a foreign business, where let's say the foreign business invests 50%, right? They the U.S. business sells them half their shares, and the foreign business brings in the capital plus the owner will have to be an employee or a investor, right? Depending on the business category. So employee for the L, investor for the E and the EB5. And in each case, they have to do the kinds of things that an executive or a hands-on manager investor does. So there can be a relationship between the two companies, and then you have to show the business structure, an organizational chart. How will the staff? If you have an L situation, you'll have to show the staff overseas. The overseas company will still have to continue. The U.S. company has to continue. So, for example, you have like an Indian IT company, and they don't have any presence in the U.S. And then let's say our U.S. company is like a marketing operation. So, and this IT company needs, let's say even, maybe customer support or marketing in the U.S. So this could be a nice tie where the Indian company and the U.S. company could form a joint venture, and the Indian side employees and principals could come and live and work in the U.S. and they, and the trade could be that, they're buying up half the shares, and so, there's issues of ownership and control, and that has to be described in the business plan. You need the marketing plan. You have to show the experience of the individuals involved. How, are these people actually going to be able to do what they say they'll do? And that's important to back it up with documentation and, proper, a thorough sort of due diligence on that side, right? And then you've got to state like, okay, who are your competitors in the U.S.? Who are your competitors globally? Let's see. I think that, and then, well, depending on the business, you might need licenses and permits, and then you've got to show like either a 3-year or a 5-year hiring timetable of growing U.S. jobs and what kinds of jobs they will be, and the financial projections and budgeting, right? So this has to be done regardless of what type of visa category we're talking about. So I wanted to just throw this out there because this is where the sort of the tango or the business, the marriage of the two businesses will take place, right? This is how these are all the things that we need to think about when we approach another party. And it might seem odd because right now we're looking at this, from, let's say, the seller's side. Now, the seller is not usually the one doing this type of analysis. It's the buyer, because they are the ones who have the need, right? They are the ones who are kind of focused, and they're looking for businesses to buy. But I think, the reason why I wanted to talk about this is that I wanted to equip our U.S. side sellers or partners with this knowledge that this is stuff that they can do. They can market themselves. They can tap into this whole market, and it's not very well structured. So how do we navigate all of this? I don't think it's impossible, but it's one of those. It does tend to be something that, with careful navigation, can be quite useful. All right, so we've done the business plan. So let's look at what are the differences here between the E and the L, and the different types of specifications, right? So what you're looking at on the E1, number one is the E1 and the E2 are like in some respects similar, but not entirely. The differences are that the E1 focuses on trade, whereas the E2 focuses on investment. So I think for our situation, the investment is a more relevant topic, right? So the one limitation is that not every country qualifies for the E2. You have to be a national of a treaty country, and the treaty country list is available on the State Department website. So number one, the person has to be a national of a treaty country. So sometimes the foreign nationals themselves don't know about all these options, right? So that's why I want to equip you with this knowledge, so that this is a process where you can actually educate the other side that, hey, you're a national of a treaty country. Why don't you think about an E2 visa? And I want to share with you, my own story. It was interesting. Like, I had met an individual who owned some commercial property here in Washington, D.C., and he had a space, multiple properties. I met him on a totally unrelated matter, on a different matter, on a family visa matter. But as we were talking, I kind of gave him, I had a sense that, okay, this guy's like a savvy businessman, and he himself was interested. He was asking me about different types of visa options, and I described the E2 visa to him, and I told him how nationals of certain countries can purchase businesses in the U.S., and as long as they're owning and operating their businesses, they can be, here indefinitely. So after 2 years after this conversation, he got a call. He called me and he said that he has a Korean national that wants to lease space from him in Georgetown to set up a Korean restaurant. And so for the landlord, it was very important that this E2 visa be approved. And so I had equipped him with enough knowledge so that he could then guide the Korean business person and then connect us. And then we embarked on this E2 visa journey. And now that restaurant's been thriving for several years. So in this case, the U.S. business was a landlord, but then there are other U.S. businesses that are providing services to this restaurant that are benefiting. So finding these individuals and investors can be lucrative. So E2, you have to, as the investor, be coming to direct and control the new U.S. enterprise. So it can't be like a passive investment. You have to be the owner-operator. You can have a U.S. partner, which is usually helpful, and that's where the joint venture arrangement would come into play. There's not really any minimum investment requirement. It has to be substantial to the business, right? So I've had them as large as like $300,000-$400,000, and as small as about $50,000. Lawyers do this, for example. They set up their own law practice, which doesn't require a whole lot of capital, as long as they can show that they'll be growing a law firm over time. You could have IT consulting business. You could have a nail salon. All kinds of businesses. Anything you can think of is permissible. Now, the L1A, right? So this is where you've got an existing foreign company with an employee that's been with them for at least a year, and they are now looking to either set up a brand new company, so they'll need a lease, they'll need employees, they'll need services, depending on the nature of their work. They may need a marketing person, and so the U.S. side, those are all the areas in which the U.S. side can be instrumental in helping them. They may want to buy a U.S. company outright. The U.S. company doesn't have to be, its business doesn't have to be related to the line of business in the home country. And if it's a 50-50 joint venture, the U.S. owner keeps 50%, the foreign owner keeps 50%. That will qualify. So the ownership, the foreign company has to have some ownership and control of the U.S. company. And then they can show that there's a certain level of managerial or executive or specialized knowledge worker that they're transferring. This, for a small company, it could be the principal that's coming to expand their investment in the U.S. And this could be a nice arrangement where an L1A visa can be obtained. Again, there's not any specific investment requirement. They have to really show that they've got at least 1 year's worth of operating expenses. They must show that they've got physical space, and they have enough funds to capitalize the business, either by funds in a U.S. bank account or enough income and savings in the home country. All right, so last one, EB5 visa, right? So here we're looking at the large amounts of money. So this is 1.8 million and 900,000, and that the investment amounts depend on where the investment is going to be located. If it's general, anywhere in the U.S., which is not a targeted employment area, which is defined as, a targeted employment area used to be like a state and local designation. Now I believe they've changed it so that the federal government determines it. And so these are basically economic development zones. So in those areas, they can invest 900,000, a lower threshold, and then in the higher amounts, they can go anywhere in the country. So with this, if you have the person with the money, they can either purchase a U.S. business outright or make a partnership with an existing U.S. business and get a green card, which is great, because it's their, themselves and their families. They're looking for better opportunities for their children, better schools. I've recently had folks from the UAE. I had one client said that they have 4 kids going to school in the UAE, and it's super expensive, and they want to come to the U.S. because the school system here is better and cheaper, and that was interesting. So the whole family moved on a, in this case, an E2, but you can have the situation on the EB5 often, and they have strict requirements, but certainly it's being done, and it will continue to be done. So that's a good source of capital from these EB5 investors. Okay, so these next couple of slides, I'm going to move through them quickly, but things that you have to see are, do you have any specific, do you need a foreign company affiliation? On the E and the EB5 you don't, on the L you have to, the foreign company must be operational as well. If it does shut down, then the US-based individual has to find some other kind of visa category. For the E's and the L's, there's not a specified job creation requirement, but it's, it can't be marginal. You have to have a staffing that supports the investor or the primary, employee that's performing executive or managerial duties. They cannot be doing administrative work themselves. The EB5, you have to create 10 new full-time permanent jobs per investor. Okay, so that's a heavy lift with a higher reward. The EB5 certainly, that's a green card in itself, so it's a permanent nationality. The E's do not lead to a green card. The L can lead to a green card as the EB1 multinational manager. So it's actually a very good opportunity where a visa holder can be here for 1 year, and then at the end of the 1 year, as long as the U.S. company's been working for 1 year, they can apply for a green card. So that's very attractive for the right type of candidate. Okay, and dependents, most of them allow a spouse and children under 21 to join the principal applicant, and spouses get work authorization. So that's also useful to know, right? That the kids will have some status to go to school, etc. Business plan requirements. So we covered this on the earlier slide, like sort of a comparison of the business plans that need to be written. So here's where the US side comes in. So here in these requirements are where we see how do we fit in, right? What can we provide to the foreign buyer, investor, partner that he or she cannot come up with on their own. So a easy one is that a U.S. business with an existing office, with the existing corporate registration, employees on staff, all of that, having all of that gives the foreign business an immediate leg up because showing that, hey, we now have merged these entities and we have an office space, we all have existing employees, that gives the visa application a huge advantage because then it's real. It's not the examining officer doesn't have to rely on just hypothetical or forecasting, right? And it's real and it's not a fraud. It's not a sham. So that's where now I work with business plan writers. It's not something that I do. I mean, I know the legal requirements, but I have several business plan writers that I know that are really good. And this is something that if it's going to be, a partnership, then has to be worked out carefully between the two parties. All right. So now, which visa option you choose or your partner chooses is, again, dependent on what they're looking for, right? So that's going to determine where we fit in, and that's where the immigration attorney comes in, right? So doing a thorough assessment and finding out what are the best options so that everything's predictable and flows smoothly. And I often recommend, on some of these topics, I mean, I have webinars that are almost on all of these topics that cover them in detail because just, the time that we have is not enough to go into a very, very, do a deep dive into each of them. But certainly if you have questions about any of these categories, please email me and, I'd be happy to talk about that. All right. So The next couple of slides have some, deep dive into the e-visa. Key point is that the U.S. company must be owned at least 50% by nationals of the treaty country. So this could be like a foreign company owning a U.S. company with a treaty national country, or a foreign individual owning the U.S. company. So you need that at least 50% to the foreign company. So the ownership and control is very important. I think we covered these ideas. You've got typically, no, it has changed in recent years for some countries, but you are looking at usually, a period of time of an initial approval and then going back and getting a renewal. It used to be 5 years, but now it's been, and then it could be like extended indefinitely. And it depends on whether we have like a first time a new business or like an existing business, and it depends also from country to country. It varies, but the idea is that as long as the business is running, there can be indefinite renewals, right? So that's good. I've mentioned this before about the treaties. There's unrestricted employment for spouses. They can work for the e-business itself, or they can work for any other business. And there's no limitation every year on the e-visas. Okay. In the current environment, it may be like, immediately, because of the embassies and consulates being shut down, if you have people that are overseas, it's not going to be very quick for them to be able to come over. But this whole process takes several months, so it's not a bad time to start prospecting, hopefully, so that in a couple of months when things open up, folks can start, arriving in the U.S. on e-visas. Okay. Let's skip over the E3. It's there. You can refer to it. L1A, intercompany transferee, and EB1 path to green card. So the L is, I think I've explained the criteria already. Again, there's no cap. And the advantage, right, is that on the green card, when time comes after 1 year or so, that the individual is ready to apply for a green card, they do not have to show that the business had tried to find a qualified U.S. worker and not found one. They can skip the labor certification part. They just have to show that the L conditions are met and this person's still working, and they can apply for a green card. I have the slide in here because I want this idea is important, that, you can have a smaller U.S. side operation in an L using a offshore staff. So this comes up in industries that are more, easily that lend themselves to remote working. So in IT, fintech, all types of like market research. You can have big operations overseas and a small operation in the U.S. And because one of the requirements is to show that there's employees and staffing that's supporting the U.S. operation, there is case law that says that those do not necessarily have to be all in the U.S. You can use resources overseas. So this is a legal issue that has come up, and so if you're interested, you can click on this link and read more. But the idea is that in some situations, you can use staff overseas to show that there is a robust U.S. operation. This slide has the EB5 program requirements. It's got pretty much the same data that we discussed earlier, and it shows a comparison of the changes recently. The threshold, the higher threshold used to be $1 million, now it's 1.8, and the lower threshold for the targeted employment area went up from 500 to 900. Okay, and there is an EB5 investment program called as the Regional Center, but that's not really relevant to our discussion here, which is geared towards U.S. businesses. So the one that we're talking about is a direct investment in a, being the investor is also operating his or her own business. Okay, this is the chart, again, summarizes the same data and pinpoints the legal source. EB5, you have to show the job creation, right? So one question that comes up that, how about, like, can you use existing jobs? So do they have to be new jobs, or can you use existing jobs? And if you have a business that is a distressed business that's going to go out of business, but for this investment, and you can show that this investment will, if without this investment those jobs will be lost, then you can use that type of argument for the EB5 job creation requirement. And this has to be demonstrated. Now, in EB5, you have a very, you need to often work with an economist and professionals in the business plan writing area, right? So it's important that we have a good handle on what the specifics are, and it is highly technical, right? So now, you have to be very mindful that in all of these categories, right, the investment funds, so anybody that you're partnering with, how have they acquired the funds that they are investing? And so that's a very important item, because it has to be demonstrated that these funds were earned lawfully. So there's a whole source of funds section, and there are ways to demonstrate the source of funds. It has to be traced back to the very earliest source, so you have to show income tax records, bank statements, often audited financials. If it's a sale of property, you have to go back to the source of the funds where the original property was bought, and then show that the funds have been transmitted and show a clear path from the investor to the U.S. So that's important, and it's a very important item to discuss with potential buyers. The direct versus regional, that is something that you should just know that there's two types of EB5s. One is sort of a passive investment, and the other is a more owner-operated type of investment. There may be changes on the horizon. We don't know how. I do believe that this program is in favor, and I think it will be more so when the dust settles on the COVID pandemic. Again, keep in mind that we're not talking about U.S. citizenship just yet. We're talking about a visa or a green card. So now, if they're here and they, on a green card, they can eventually become U.S. citizens, but they are not going to be U.S. citizens at the end of any of these processes just yet. And when they get green card, they have to be subject, to tax on a worldwide basis. So that's something important. And then on the L's and the E's as well, they're making U.S. source income, so they have to consult with a tax professional to figure out how to manage their tax exposure on a global basis. The next slide, it just is a little bit more sequenced description of the EB5 process, right? So the investor will select the project, then they'll have the source of funds documentation, they'll make the investment, they'll file a petition called the I-526. The U.S. side is not really involved in this process, the filing of the immigration petition, other than perhaps providing the supporting documents. If the investor is already in the U.S., and I think, right now, there are people already in the U.S. that are looking for E2 options, or, they came here to explore business investments, and due to the COVID shutdown, they have some time on their hands and they're prospecting. So those guys can do a change of status while being in the U.S. They don't have to go to the embassies overseas which are closed. So that the target group of people that is already in the U.S. is a good um, demographic to sort of target. And I'll spend some time later on how we do that. Um, but I just mentioned that consular processing versus adjustment of status because those are the consular processing is for folks who are outside the U.S. and the adjustment of status or change of status is for people that are already in the U.S. So, some of your prospects might already be in the U.S. They're not necessarily outside. Okay, and then for the EB-5, they'll initially get a 2-year conditional green card, and then at the end of the 2 years, if they show that their money's still invested and the business is operational and the jobs have been created, they can then file another petition to remove conditions, and they get a permanent green card. Okay, so how do you find the right partner, right? So again, this is brainstorming. These are not by any means the only or the best sources, but I feel that as lawyers, business lawyers, immigration lawyers, we are in touch with a lot of different types of people that are doing a lot of different things in many different countries. So over the years, I've developed relationships with lawyers in other countries, businesses in other countries, government people, academic people, and all kinds of folks, right? So, and I think this is the same for a lot of my other colleagues. They may have, contacts in foreign countries that could provide some referrals. So, for example, the business brokers. I do work with a few that I'm not an expert in finding businesses to buy, right? That's not my expertise. I have legal expertise, so I'm not going to be qualified to really offer advice, but I can certainly make introductions to other professionals who can, provide that type of expertise. So there are business brokers out there that do have reach to those foreign investor communities. I think that trade association and industry conferences are great. Well, now we're not really having in-person stuff, but there may be webinars and there's a lot of interaction online. And eventually, hopefully, when the lockdowns ease up, we'll see more of these opportunities to meet with face-to-face with some of these foreign professionals and investor principals that may be informed about these options and then can seriously consider whether they want to use one of these immigration vehicles. And then if they find a good local partner, they then feel more confident. Because what I find is that a lot of times, I think it's the case for all of us, right? And no matter where we are, we want to be sure that we can trust the people that we are giving our funds to, and we are building a long-term relationship. So that face-to-face meeting and direct interaction is so important. Foreign chambers of commerce. So in any, there's so many groups all over the place, right? So I know, like, for example, Washington, D.C. has a lot of embassies, and so there's a lot of events that other countries are hosting to encourage investment in their own countries, and that's a good place to go and meet people. And not just Washington, D.C., pretty much all the embassies and consulates everywhere and different centers of economic activity, there are attempts by foreign countries to help their businesses to sell into the U.S. or make connections so that their commercial activity is increased. And then the same thing with the U.S. The U.S. has in each of its embassies and consulates people dedicated to promoting the U.S. So those are good resources. I know that every state in the U.S. has an economic development agency where they're seeking to attract investment, and sometimes at the county level they have these groups, and so they have already channels of communication to foreign groups. Right, so that's just some brainstorming that I did to put this together, and it's something that I'm always obviously trying to help my clients navigate. And another thing that I was thinking of was when you talk, I mean, it, I listed lawyer at the top because I'm a lawyer, but these networks could be accountants, they could be, any number of other types of professionals have these international connections. Like we as lawyers have, like the American Bar Association has like thousands of members all over the world, and so in any major world city, we have a colleague that we can reach out to. I know that our firm, Offit Kurman, is a member of a group of professionals that's global, that gives us contacts all over the world. So CGI is the name, and you can email me if you want to find out more about it. Right. So this the reason I present this is these are the ways in which the connections can be made, and then if the other side is not already aware of some of these visas and immigration options, then the U.S. business can inform them and then hopefully make a partnership, and that's mutually rewarding. All right. How do you find the right partner? Now, this is once you have a prospect, and then you're assessing them, right? So nationality. Some countries are part of the treaty countries, and it's easier for them to visit. Um, so the treaty countries for the E2, they can be easily identified. Look at their immigration history, like if they have some glitches, like if they've overstayed or if there's any reason why their visa is going to be denied. That's can be a problem. And then their education and experience, like do they really have the credentials that there's that will be needed. Right. So then, and then it's some of the technical immigration and visa stuff. And I'm going to quickly skip over that. All right. So that was like the investment side of the visas, right? Now we have a few more quick slides on the employment side. So the H-1B and the H-2B. Now, this is more where folks are, if you are an existing business and you have a good candidate, typically on the H-1B side, it's going to be like a fresh college graduate or a fresh master's graduate degree holder, and they are hardworking, they're a good fit, they have the knowledge, and so how do you keep them here? So the one way for a degreed professional is an H-1B, and on the H-1B, there's a lottery, so not everyone can get in, and unless they already have an H from another employer. So if they have another H, existing H with another employer, then transferring them is fairly easy. You just basically have to show that you're paying them the prevailing wage in the area, and that they have the degree that you need, and that it's a specialty occupation, and that you have the ability to pay them and give them work for the duration of their visa, right? If it's a brand new case, then you have to apply to get into the lottery, and then the chances are about 50-50 of selection right now, because it's 85,000 visas available and about 200,000 apply. Okay, but the lottery application process has become quick and cheap right now. It's a quick online process, so there's not a lot of legal fees and not a lot of upfront government fees involved, right? So thing to think about for the future. H2B, it's for those non-technical areas, and it's for short-term, like the agricultural workers. So one-time need. You do have to show that you haven't found any U.S. workers. It's a little more complicated to get these folks. I'll just leave it at that. And if you have more questions about H2B, I can certainly answer them by email. All right, last one is the F1 OPT. So this is now there's a lot of students in the U.S. that are from foreign countries, and after they graduate, they are given automatically a 1-year post-graduation work authorization, right? So they're looking for experience, and this is an area where there's not really a minimum wage required to be paid. So these can be will perhaps lead to the incentive for the foreign student is to get some experience to put on their resume and then hopefully land a permanent job. So most of the university international student offices, they're good resources. With the current economic downturn, there's probably a lot of these folks that are looking for jobs. Now, they can certainly work remotely. If they go back to their home countries, they can continue to work remotely for the U.S. company. There's no restriction on doing that, and a lot of folks are doing that right now. There are options. For example, if a company really desperately wants someone and they're based overseas and they can't come to the U.S. because there's not any visa option for them, they could be put on payroll and there's all kinds of scenarios, but like the U.S.-based company can create a sister company in the foreign country and then employ them there. And then in the right scenario, they can be transferred back to the U.S. as a L1A after a year. But again, it's not very simple. It's got to be planned and executed properly. The F1 OPT folks, they also do get extensions. If they're a STEM, which is a science, technology, engineering, and mathematics degree, they will get a 3-year OPT. Okay, so let me see. That is really all that we're, covering today. Let me see. I think in conclusion, what I think my hope today was that number one, for the U.S. side, professional or business person, to understand that in their network or within reach are these resources that can connect them to foreign nationals that are very keen to invest in the U.S. A lot of it is, for example, the family-based immigration, even the marriage-based immigration, like it takes so long. If you're a brother or sister of a U.S. national, it can take a decade or more to be in the U.S. And as conditions in certain countries worsen, folks want to find ways to, come to a more just society, to come to a place where merit is rewarded, and they're really looking for ways to come to the U.S., right? So some of these ways, the E, the L, the EB-5, EB-5 is really for the richer people, and the challenge there becomes that, unless they get a loan or some other way of raising the money, when they're so rich, they're doing well in their home country, so they don't want to really move, right? So it becomes hard. They have so much money that, with this kind of money, they can, in most developing countries, you can afford a pretty nice lifestyle, right? But the L's and the E's are, for the qualified and experienced business people and professionals. They are really good options. So my hope was to really point out that in this downturn, there may be this argument, and I'm seeing this, that there's some good deals to be had in the U.S. And once we come out of the recession, the downturn, we're going to be booming. So this may be a unique opportunity right now, and I've hopefully given you some tools. Okay, so let me see if there's any questions. All right, so let me just conclude on that note. Again, I thank you for joining us. If this has been helpful, please send it to your community email. Ask them to register. It's free. They can listen to the recording on their own at their own pace. And our next webinar, so we decided to change it up a little bit. Our next webinar is going to be on, it's going to be a conversation with a HR leader on the impact of COVID-19 on business and immigration legal matters. And our next speaker is going to be LaDonna Ogden, who is the Director of Human Resources and Operations for an amazing company called Beeline Medical. You can check out their website there, and they are also a client of our firm, and we've helped them with different visa issues. So please join us and hear this conversation with LaDonna Ogden next week at the same time. And with that, I want to conclude. I want to definitely thank our Director of Marketing, Jennifer Helfman, for putting all this together. And please send me any questions, any suggestions you have for topics that you are interested in that we can put together in these webinars. So I wish you a good rest of the day. Thank you for joining, and take care.